Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam, Trailokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva, Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva, Tvameva Vedya Dravidam Tvameva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So we are still in our 13th chapter. And what verse are we on?
Verse 57.
Chapter 13, verse 57.
Can I start?
Please.
Tarhi karana vijnanat karyajnanam itirite madbodhan mritika buddhet yuktam syat kotra vismayah. Doubt. The statement that through the knowledge of the cause you arrive at a knowledge of the effect amounts to saying that by a knowledge of clay you acquire a knowledge of clay. What is there wonderful about it?
Oh, yeah. So a lot of this has to do with what's the benefit of self-realization. So you know the absolute truth. So what? What's that have to do with the quality of my life? And here he's using argument and logic, and the objector says, so if you know knowledge of the cause, the self, you know knowledge of the effect, which is nothing but the self as name and form. So what? And the other piece of it, knowledge of the clay doesn't give you knowledge of a pot. That's another knowledge. Let's see what Vidyaranya says about all this.
Satyam karyeshu vastvasham. Satyam karyeshu vastvanshah. Karanatmeti janatah. Vismayo asvithagnyasya. Vismaya kena varyate. Reply. The real substance in the effect part is identical with its cause. This may not be surprising to the wise, but who can prevent the ignorant being surprised at this?
So the foolish person may not know that the cause and the effect from the standpoint of substance are the same. The example I like to give, so you have a bunch of old broken jewelry from your grandmother. You take it to the jeweler and say, I have my anniversary coming up soon. I want you to make a beautiful gold ring for my beloved. The jeweler says, oh, of course. How long will it take? Oh, 3 weeks. So the person comes back in 3 weeks, and the jeweler has this lovely box with black velvet, and he opens the box, and there's a beautiful silver ring. Now, wait a minute, I gave you a bunch of gold. Oh, no, no, no. Once you make the ring, it becomes silver. Was the fellow cheated? You take the broken gold jewelry and melt it down, and then you make a ring. It does not leave its swabhava. It remains gold. The jeweler cheated him. So, what's the point? All the names and forms and circumstances and events are nothing but Brahman. And they never leave their swabhava, their self-nature. Now, I want to interject a little something here. And that's what Vyasa, our poet, does in the 16th verse in the 2nd chapter of Gita, where he plays with these two words, sat and bhava. Sat means existence, bhava means being. I don't have it from memory. I think it starts nasato vidyate bhavaha. Na bhavo. Anyway, it goes on like that. So basically, what he says is, in the ordinary world, we have things and beings. We have things that exist, and then we have notions of things that don't exist. The chair exists, the table exists. The child of a barren woman doesn't exist. The horns of a hare don't exist. Things that are sat, they are, and asat, they don't exist. Put that on the shelf. Then we have things that are, we have beings. Puneet is a being, I'm a being, a dog is a being, a chair is not a being, it's a thing. So we have beings and things that are non-being. And then Vyasa, our poet, says, only being really exists. If it has no being, it has no existence. Now let's go back to our pot and clay. In the past week or so, we've been talking about you have the material cause, which is the clay. And what's pot? Pot is just an idea or a power, he says. You make the clay into a pot. You can't have pot without clay. There's not some abstraction of pot running around. It's an idea. It is, in the worldly sense, a sat. It only has existence with reference to the clay. It is the clay itself that assumes the form of pot. Likewise, only being is. And what we see as name and form is not separate from being. Just like I can't remove pot from the clay and then the pot exists in some way. No, it only exists as imagination. So also the real being is the material cause of the whole phenomenon. And the images are nama rupa, just names and forms. And they never cause the substratum being to change. Consciousness is always kutastha, to use Vidyaranya's language, still and immovable. It's only when I become identified with something that has no actual being, the names and forms, that I get all messed up, all identified, all attached, all. So that's the import of this whole discussion. When you understand that the self in you is inviolate, and just as how do you know yourself? It is self-evident. You don't see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, emote, or think yourself, yet you know you are. Listen very carefully. My knowledge of the phenomenal world is still nothing but the self-evidence of the self. What else am I knowing? No outside, no inside. Sarvam kalvidam brahma. Sarvamidam is code, means all this, means the phenomenal world. Kalu, verily, is Brahman. What about the names and form? Brahma Satyam, Jagat Nitya. Brahman alone is real, has Sat, has Bhava. Jagat, names and forms, Nitya, illusion. Meditate on this. Remember it. Keep reminding ourselves of the dream-like nature of the phenomenal world. Doesn't mean we don't engage. Gita last night, we had Krishna enjoins Arjuna. Do your niyatam karma. Niyatam karma means your obligatory duties. Do your effing job. And if the Lord takes your job away, all right, God, this is Jim reporting for duty. What do you want me to do next? And let it all go. The Master Jesus told a very profound story. Once there was a man who had great wealth. He wanted to keep all his treasures, grains and animals and everything. This is in old timey days. So he had a storehouse, a barn for it all. And then he got more stuff. And so he's sitting there in his house thinking, I'm going to have to build a bigger storehouse to put all my stuff in. He was very pleased with himself. And there's a knock on the door. And in comes the angel of death, who says to him, fool, tonight your life is required of you. All that hoarding gone. Let go. Doesn't mean not to do niyatang karma. Next verse.
आरम्भे परिणामी च लौकिकश्चैककारणे ज्ञाते सर्वम् इति श्रुत्वा प्राप्नुवन्येव विस्मयन्. The followers of Arambha Bhavada and Parinamavada and ordinary men may find it puzzling to hear that a knowledge of the cause should give a knowledge of all of its effects.
Let's see if we can bring this into a modern worldly example. So I think scientists still say that every snowflake is unique in its crystalline structure. No two snowflakes are alike. But if you want to know what is the material out of which a snowflake is made, all you need to do is know water. And now you know the cause and, in essence, the effect of all snowflakes. Once you know the ocean, you know what all waves are made of. Once you know Brahman, you know what this world is. And it's not scary. It's all Brahman. Going on.
Advaite bhimukhi kurtam evatraikasya bodhatah sarvabodha shrutau naiva nanatvasya vivakshaya. To direct the attention of the pupil to the non-dual truth, the Chandogya Upanishad teaches that by a knowledge of the one cause, all of its effects are known. It does not speak of the multiplicity of effects.
So when we have in English the word omniscient, some people think that that means the yogi has these powers and can read people's minds and knows what's happening in some village across the world and knows what's going on in some star here and there. It doesn't mean that. It means all knowable things are only known because of chit consciousness. You know all sensory perceptions. You know the body itself and its feelings and sensations. You know energy, you know feelings, you know thoughts, you even know your own ego sense. You know ignorance. What is Veda Anta, the end of knowledge? What is that knowledge by which everything is known, without which nothing can be known, beyond which there is nothing to know? Veda, the end. Once you deeply, intuitively grasp that the whole universe is nothing but Brahman, you don't need to know the material how and the why of everything. Next verse.
Ekam vritti pandavijnanat sarvamrinmayadhirtha tathaika brahmabodhena jagat buddhi vibhavyatam. Just as by knowing a lump of clay, one knows all objects made of clay, so by knowing the one Brahman, one knows the real element of the whole phenomenal world.
So there's his summation. If I know what clay is, I know the material cause of all clay containers. If I know gold, I know every piece, the material cause of every piece of gold, jewelry. Know yourself. You know the material cause of the whole universe. Next verse.
Satchit sukhatmakam brahma namarupatmakam jagat tapaniye shrutam brahma satchitananda lakshanam. The nature of Brahman is existence, consciousness, and bliss, whereas the nature of the world is name and form. In the Narsimha Uttara Tapaniya Upanishad, existence, consciousness, and bliss are said to be the indications of Brahman.
So the world it never leaves its dharma. Brahman is Satchidananda. In truth, that's the nature of the world. But in ignorance, I superimpose likes, dislikes, fear, all that stuff. So for the jnani, there's no resistance to any worldly experience. It's all Next verse.
Sadrupam Aruni Praha Prajnanam Brahma Brahmavich Sanat Kumara Anandam Evamanyatra Kamyatam. Aruni described Brahman as of the nature of existence, the Bhavrachas of the Rig Veda as consciousness, and Sanat Kumara as bliss. The same is declared in other Upanishads.
So here he is simply footnoting that notion. The self is, it is sentient, and it is the fountainhead, the wellspring of all happiness. Bliss absolute, not a blissful feeling that occurs to the human mind. Next one.
Vichitya sarvarupani kritva namani tishtati yaham vyakaraname namarupe iti shrutehe. After creating names and forms, Brahman remains established in his nature, that is, remains as immutable as ever, says the Purusha Sutta. Another Shruti says that Brahman as the self reveals names and forms.
So here he's simply footnoting his ideas from various scriptures. So again, there's no personality of Brahman that's creating things. Gee, I think I'll make a couch. No. The idea is in consciousness itself, the potentiality for all name and form is inherent. The locus of Maya is Brahman itself. And it's what it does, just like it's the nature of the mirror to reflect images. It's the nature of the crystal to have images appear in it. It's the nature of Brahman for the universe to appear. Shiva is always wedded to his Shakti. Next one.
Avyakritam pura srishte rurdhvam vya triyate dvidha achintya shaktimar yaisha brahmanya vyakrita bhidha. Another Shruti says that before creation, the universe was unmanifest, and afterwards it became manifest as name and form. Here, Maya, the inexplicable power of Brahman, is referred to as unmanifest.
Yes. So I like the definition of Maya. It's the word we use to describe how the impossible seems possible. If consciousness is one without a second and immovable, no change ever, how is it that this Jagat appears? I had one teacher say the reason we call it Jagat because it goes Jagat, 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 Jagat. It's always moving. But nothing really. Now, so what? Why are they, beating on this drum? The practice is dial down the emotional reactivity. Dial down the craving and aversion and the fear. Let it go, let it go, let it go. It's all okay. If you want serenity, drop the craving nature of the mind. It's so simple, not easy, but it's simple. How do we do that? We deal with three questions. Who am I? What is this world? How has it come about? That's all that he's talking about. I am Brahman. This world is Brahman. What about the names and forms and all the things I don't like? Nitya, sankalpa, imagination. They never alter or touch the substrate. It's all okay. Next verse.
Avitriya Brahma Nishtha Vikaram Yatya Nekadaha Mayam tu Prakritim Vidyan Mayinam tu Maheshwaram. This Maya, which rests unmanifest in the immutable Brahman, subsequently undergoes numerous modifications. Quote, know Maya as Prakriti, the material cause of the universe, and the Supreme Lord as the ruler substratum of Maya. End quote.
Yes. So that's all it is. Out of consciousness, Nirguna Brahman waves Maya, Shakti, the primordial prana, the cause of all this, which appears but never really leaves its swabhava. Now, why are verses like this important to remember? I was talking with a fellow this past week, and he's a Buddhist, but we have a lot of stuff in common. He's pretty deep. And he was remarking that a lot of the people that he hangs out with, they're really well-intentioned, progressive people. And their group mind is to spend a lot of time being angry together about the current state of the world. And my friend is beginning to see, I just don't want to go there with them. There's nothing to be gained by it. These particular friends, they're enjoying the fact that misery loves company. That's their world. They get to have it. It's another one of Brahman's forms. But you don't have to live in that world. Like I've told you about my friend who was a vaccine denier during COVID. He would go on his phone on various social media things and research. And I don't know. I can't judge the veracity, but big pharma's doing this, angry at this and angry in that, and they're gonna get us, and all this sort of stuff. Why they may even be putting tracking devices in us, yada yada yada. And I just told him, stop. I don't live in your world. You can live in a world of fear if you wish. Knock yourself out. But I live in God's universe. I live and move and have my being in God. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. You're welcome to your world. But I'm not going to go there with you. So it can be a challenge if you're moving in a social sphere where people get a charge out of glooming and dooming. Doesn't mean not to do your niyatam karma, to do your obligatory actions. If you're led to make a difference in the world, by all means do it. Not saying not to do that. Not saying to run away from them. But nothing in the world has the power to rob us of our serenity. We have to let it. Because of my belief in a personal sense of self, because my belief that the world of name and form is manifest, is real, it's separate from consciousness, and is inherently joy-giving or misery-producing, or something to fear. And I always wonder, who does more good to change the world? The activists who are marching in the streets with placards, or the yogi high up in the Himalayas, deep in samadhi, intending the well-being of the world? I don't know. I honestly don't. Next verse.
आद्यो विकार आकाश सोऽस्ति भात्यपि च प्रियः अवकाशस्तस्य रूपं तन्मिथ्या न तु तत्त्रयम्. The first modification of Maya is Akasha. It exists, is manifest, and is dear to all. The special form of Akasha is space, which is unreal, but its other three properties, derived from its cause, Brahman, are not unreal.
I'm curious to see how he goes on with this discussion. I'm not quite sure what he's driving at, so let's go on.
न व्यक्ते पूर्वमस्त्येव न पञ्चाचापि नाशतः आदान्वन्ते च यन्नास्ति वर्तमानेऽपि तत्तथाः. The spatial property does not exist before manifestation and ceases also to exist after destruction. That which is non-existent before creation and after dissolution is so even in the present, that is during creation.
Is unmanifest before, is that what he said? Or manifest before?
Does not exist before manifestation,
yes,
and ceases to exist after
okay.
destruction.
So to riff on another scripture, the way it's set forward in Yoga Vasishta, there are three kinds of space. First is physical space, and even the physicists now are saying that it comes into being and dissolves. Does anybody out there understand inflation, what the astrophysicists are talking about? I think. Who's there?
I just said not a clue.
My understanding of it is before the Big Bang, there was a singularity, an infinite amount of mass in an infinitely small and dense point. Then something disturbed it, they don't know what. And the universe grew to about 3/4 of its present size in like a tiny fraction of a second. In other words, space, physical space was created. Very bizarre. The second kind of space is the space of the mind. So you can close your eyes and visualize a mountain. You see the sky around the mountain. What's the distance between you and the mountain? I'm in Siddhabadi, and I'm seeing the Kulu Valley before me, and there's Dharamsala, and then the 25,000-foot Himalayas in the distance. So I created space in the mind. Open my eyes, and it's gone. But the Chid Akasha, the space of consciousness itself, which has no dimension. How big are you? Sometimes it feels like I'm a point from which perception proceeds. Sometimes when I'm very quiet and the attention is introverted, my essential nature feels vast, shoreless, bound. Infinite space of consciousness. It's actually outside of space and time. It has no physical dimension. But what Vidyaranya is saying here now, he's talking about that first space, physical space, which in fact has a beginning, and if there's a big crunch at the end of the universe, space will disappear. Going on.
Avyakta adini bhutani vyaktam dhyani bharata avyaktan nidhanan ved yaha krishnarjunam prati. Sri Krishna said to Arjuna, O descendant of Bharata, beings are unmanifest in the beginning, manifest in the present, and unmanifest at the end.
So this is his authority for this. So what we have, what the logicians talk about is prior non-existence. Prior non-existence has no beginning, but it has an end. Then something comes into manifestation. That has a beginning, and that has an end. And it's gone. And we have subsequent non-existence, which has a beginning and no end. This glass, for the sake of argument, was made in 2010. Prior to 2010, for how long did it not exist? An eternity. Then the glass blower makes the glass, comes into existence. But if I drop it and break it, it goes out of existence. For how long will it cease to exist? The rest of eternity. Next verse.
Mridvatte Satchidananda Anugachanti Sarvada Nirakashe Sada Dinam Anubhuti Nijatmani. Just as clay exists in its modifications, such as the pot, in all the three divisions of time, so existence, consciousness, and bliss ever pervade the Akasha. When the idea of space is negated from Akasha, what remains is one's own self existence, consciousness, and bliss infinity.
Yes. So again, back to the way Yoga Vasishtha describes it. If I negate physical space, what do I mean? Withdraw your attention from the phenomenal world. How do I negate mental space? Withdraw your attention. Who are you? What are you? What's the eternal factor? And in fact, what exists as mental space and physical space is really just consciousness, Chaitanya, appearing as Namarupa. Don't worry. It's all going to be okay. Next one.
Avakashe vismृतेऽथ तत्र किं भाति ते वद शून्यं मे वेति चेदस्तु नाम तादृक् vibhatihi. When the idea of space is negated from Akasha, what remains of it? If you say nothing remains, we accept it and say that we say that which is represented by the word nothing is revealed.
I think he's just playing with words here. It's kind of like the person who claims to be an atheist. I know for sure there is no God. The very fact that someone adamantly exclaims there is no God means the idea of God exists for them. Very different than if I say, I know for sure there is, or there is not. I don't have a word, which is the object of that sentence. So the point he's getting at here, don't get caught up in words. I again think Vidyaranya is making this whole discussion far more complicated than it needs to be. You are awareness. You do not have awareness. You are awareness. That awareness is Swayambhu, self-evident. It is bhava, it is being as well as sat, existence. When I look out through my senses and see a world of name and form, it is the same stuff. And the names and forms are just like a transparency glued onto it, hung in it. And if you still your mind, if you meditate with your eyes open, and really slow down the mind, you will find the universe thinning out. I can remember like it was yesterday. It's when we had our meditation center in the city. Mark Herman remembers that. On Market Street, remember Mark?
Yeah,
So do you remember Susan Bell?
yes, I do.
I think we were doing Mandukya Upanishad. Can't remember exactly the text. But we all got really tuned up. And the universe just thinned out. And she just burst into tears because she directly saw everything she'd ever loved, that she thought was important, that was valuable, was just Namu. Now, after the tears, she was quite ecstatic. Hired a kite. But she had the direct experience. Many of us have had it. The inherent nothingness. The names and forms are shunyata. Empty. But that doesn't mean ultimate reality is nothing. It's not shunya. It is purna. It is full. And you see the same world as the ordinary person, but it's a very different world. It's full of luminosity and brilliance and beauty, and nothing to be resisted or fought or denied. Next verse.
तादृक्त्वादेन तत्सत्त्व अवदासीन्येन तत्सुखम् आनुकूल्य प्रातिकूल्य हीनं यत् नित्यं sukham. Because it is such that we must attribute existence to the remaining entity. Being productive of no misery, it is bliss, for the absence of both the favorable and the unfavorable is the bliss of the self.
Yes. So the self is outside of conducive and non-conducive situations. For the ordinary mind, when the situation is conducive, based on my past, I'm happy. When the situation is non-conducive, don't like it, I'm unhappy. For the jnani, who no longer believes the mind and no longer invests a separate reality into the world. The mind has a peace that passes all understanding. The mind has a happiness, tranquility that's independent of external circumstances. It is a non-mediated experience, as opposed to the mediated experience of the world through a medium of people, places, things, and conditions. Next one.
आनुकूल्ये हर्षधि स्यात् प्रातिकूल्ये तु दुःखभीतिः द्वया भावे निजानन्दो निजदुःखं न तु क्वचित्. One gets pleasure from a favorable object and grief from an unfavorable one. But in the natural state, free from both, there is the natural bliss of the self. There is never any experience of misery in that state.
Yeah. So for the man or woman of wisdom, external circumstances go up and down, what I call the sine wave of life. Tide comes in, tide goes out. But the person of steady wisdom has a peace that's not of this world. What the Master Jesus meant, I'm in the world, but not of it. Peace I give you, my peace I give you, not as the world. Peace that passes all understanding, that never decays. Next verse.
निजानन्दे स्थिरे हर्षो कयोर्व्यत्ययक्षणात् मनस क्षणिकत्वेन तयोर्मानसतेष्यताम्. The natural bliss of the self is uniform and steady, but the mind, due to its fickle nature, passes in a moment from joy to sorrow. So both are to be looked upon as the creations of the mind.
Yes. So worldly joy, worldly sorrow. Understand that it's a mechanical process. There is nothing inherently good about any situation, person, place, or thing. They are neutral. But according to the mind's past, I interpret the situation as conducive. If it's non-conducive, the rest of the time, unconscious. All the mind does. Just watch it. Just watch it. See how incredibly repetitive the process is. There I am wanting again. Aren't you tired of it? It's so boring. It's so repetitive. It's so stupid and so temporary. There I am all upset again. Aren't you tired of that? Tell me this is the first time you've felt that way. Aren't you just bored with it? Let it go. Let it all go. At least in your meditation period. And then endeavor to extend that through your life. Well, what should I do? How should I act? Don't worry, your body will be impelled into action by prarabdha. But don't get involved with it. Be like an actor in a play. Sarvamaya, Sarvamana. It's all Maya, it's all illusion, it's all bliss in the end. Next verse.
Akashetyevamānanda sattabhānenu tu sammate vayavadi deha paryantam vastushvevam vibhavyatam. Thus in Akasha also we accept bliss, that is, it is fundamentally existence, consciousness, and bliss. And similarly, we can establish that the fundamental nature of all objects, from air to the physical body, is essentially the same.
Yeah. So if I dial down my reactivity, my superimpositions, even though the world is seen, I know it's unreality, and it no longer has the power to rob me of my serenity. Or as the Shakespeare sonnet says, love looks on tempests and is never shaken. Next one.
Gati sparshav vayurupam vahnadar prakashane jalasya dravanta bhume kaఠిన్యం cheti nirnayah. The special properties of air have been determined as motion and touch, of fire, heat and light, of water, liquidity, and of earth, solidity.
Let's see where he's going with the ton mantras going on.
Asadharana akara oshadhya nanu pushyatpi evam vibhavyam manasa tattadrupam yathochitam. Similarly, the special properties of plants, foods, bodies, and other objects can be thought of by the mind.
So the mind can have these various paradigms, constructs, maps of a phenomenal world. So what? Let's see what he says about it.
Anekadha vibhinneshu namarupeshu chaikadha tishtanti satchidananda visanvado na kasyachit. In the manifold objects, different in names and forms, the common element is existence, consciousness, and bliss. Nobody can dispute this.
Yes. So if I disengage from the mind's adhyasa, superimposition, then I do not experience the world as inherently joy-giving and misery-producing. It just is seen. In Gita, this is called asparsha yoga. What's asparsha mean? Who remembers?
Untouchable.
Untouched, yes. Prichati means to touch. Asparsha means untouched. What's yoga mean?
Union.
Join. So Krishna calls it asparsha yoga. Swamiji would say the touch of the untouched. So it is because of you The body, mind, intellect functions, but the senses perceive. But you are never touched. Likewise, when you look out on the world, now this is advanced teaching, and you see the world of name and form constantly moving and changing. Remember, if it has no being, it has no real sut. And what is being is never touched. Talking with a young man who came back from a 2-month trip to India, and he's really sick. His kidneys have shut down, he's retaining fluid in his extremities. They think something's wrong with his blood, and he's been like 10 days in Highland Hospital. And he's frightened. But he's a yogi. He's a yogi, the follower of Meher Baba. And the best I could do to help him today was remember, you are not the body. You are a changeless, eternal, deathless being. Even if your mind's nuts, you're okay. Hang on to that. Can't give that teaching to people who are completely identified with the body, with whom the world appears very real. It's cruel. You don't do that. You meet people where they are. Next verse. What verse are we on, Mark?
I think we're on 79. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, sorry. Nistatve namarupe dve janmanashya yute chate buddhaya brahmani viksha swasamudre buddhavdivat. Both name and form are without any real existence because they are subject to creation and destruction. So know them as superimposed by the intellect on Brahman, just as waves and foam are on the ocean.
Classic image of it. Superimposition. So the term that Shankara will use is adyonya adhyasa. Anyonya adhyasa. Mutual superimposition. So I superimpose on myself the qualities of the not self. I think I'm my body. I think I'm my feelings. I think I'm my ego. But then I superimpose on the not self. I externalize the qualities of the self. The sofa is over there, separate from me. Puneet is over there, separate from me. And he's a nice fellow, so he makes me happy. Sat is over there. The Chit is over there. Anand is over there. Anyonya adhyasa, this mutual superimposition. So the practice, if we go to Shankara's great work, Vivekachudamani, so much of the work, maybe 2/3 of it, involves discrimination between the self and the not self. So that we get rooted. I'm that witnessing consciousness. I'm that space of pure awareness. And then all of a sudden, he says there's no duality. Essentially, he says we lied. There's no not self. What we've been calling the not self is also the self. And then he gives us the practice of how to move through the world. And Mandukya gives us what I think is the most powerful tool. Keep comparing the waking state, the Vishwa, to the dream state. They're not fundamentally any different. What we see as a world of name and form is nothing but the refraction, the splintering of mind. Don't believe it. Don't get involved. Asparsha yoga. Stay detached. All right, we'll quit here. What verse are we on for next week? 80. 80. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om.